You black man, do you even know how fast you were driving? People like you don't belong behind the wheel of a car like that. Officer Bradley barked loudly, his voice sharp enough to pierce the thick September air as Marcus Green stood frozen beside his sleek black sedan at the crowded gas station, his heart pounding in disbelief that what should have been a simple fuel stop had turned into a humiliating public spectacle. Because instead of asking for his license politely or explaining any real violation, the officer had immediately jumped to accusations, claiming Marcus must have stolen the car since someone like him couldn't possibly afford it. And as the officer's words cut deeper and deeper, Marcus could feel the curious eyes of strangers drilling into him, some whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief, while others fumbled with their phones as if unsure whether to intervene, record, or walk away. But Marcus, a 34-year-old IT consultant who had worked tirelessly for more than a decade, often pulling late nights to meet demanding deadlines, knew deep in his soul that if he raised his voice or made one wrong move, his life could be at risk. So he stood tall, gripping his wallet tightly, carefully pulling out his driver's license and registration to show the officer, only to have them snatched from his hands without so much as a glance. And then, as if the humiliation wasn't enough, Officer Bradley leaned closer, his badge glinting under the afternoon sun, and sneered, "This car doesn't belong to you. Admit it before things get worse," making Marcus's jaw tighten as he bit back the angry retort boiling in his chest, forcing himself to stay calm while his dignity was being stripped away in public. And though his voice trembled, he spoke firmly. "Officer, this car is mine. I have the documents to prove it. Please check them properly." But Bradley just laughed, shaking his head, as if Marcus's words were nothing more than lies, before turning toward the small crowd and announcing loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, we may have caught ourselves a car thief today," igniting a ripple of gasps and murmurs through the bystanders, though not everyone believed him, because standing near the convenience store entrance was a young woman named Claire, a law student who had been recording from the very beginning, her phone capturing every baseless accusation, every cruel word, every time Marcus was treated as guilty before being given a chance to prove his innocence. And she could hardly believe her eyes as Bradley continued to harass Marcus, circling the car, calling in backup on his radio, and even threatening to have the car impounded, while Marcus's stomach twisted in knots, because this car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of years of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifice. And now it was being reduced to nothing more than evidence of a crime he hadn't committed. And though fear clawed at his chest, he remembered his mother's words from long ago. "Son, the truth will always stand tall, even when lies try to bury it." So he held his ground, refusing to give the officer the satisfaction of breaking down. But the tension only grew heavier, the whispers louder, and the humiliation sharper as Bradley smirked and said, "If you're really innocent, why do you look so nervous? Only guilty men sweat like that." While Marcus, fighting back the urge to shout, thought to himself, "Of course I'm nervous. You're humiliating me in front of the whole town." And just when it seemed the nightmare couldn't get worse, another patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing, making Marcus's stomach drop as two more officers stepped out. Though their expressions weren't as smug as Bradley's, and one of them, Sergeant Miller, shot him a skeptical look, but also seemed slightly uneasy with the way Bradley was handling things, and still, Marcus stood his ground, his voice steady as he said again, "Please just check my documents properly. You'll see the car is mine." But Bradley waved him off, too drunk on the attention, too blinded by his prejudice, to notice that Claire's camera was still rolling, that the murmurs in the crowd were turning against him, that justice, though slow, was already quietly building its case against him. And Marcus, though humiliated, though treated as less than human, had no idea that this day, this painful, humiliating day, would become the moment where the truth finally roared louder than the lies, setting into motion a chain of events that would bring Officer Bradley's arrogance crashing down around him. The crowd that had gathered at the gas station lingered, their murmurs swelling as Marcus stood stoically beside his car, his documents still clutched in Officer Bradley's careless grip. And though the humiliation of being treated like a criminal gnawed at his spirit, Marcus refused to let his voice crack, determined that calmness would be his shield, while Bradley, puffing his chest with a smug grin, strutted about as if he had already secured a trophy, announcing to his backup, "We've got ourselves a thief here. Let's tow the car and take him in." But before the other officers could move, a voice rang out clear and unwavering from the crowd. "That's not true. I've got everything on video." And it was Claire, the young law student, stepping forward with her phone raised high, her hands trembling, but her voice steady as she declared, "This man showed you his license and registration, and you ignored it. You targeted him because of his skin color, and everyone here saw it." Her words slicing through the tense air like a blade, making the murmurs erupt into outright protests as others in the crowd began nodding, some speaking up too. "Yeah, we saw it. He didn't do anything wrong. Why are you harassing him?" And suddenly, Bradley's confidence faltered, his eyes narrowing as he snapped, "Put that phone away or I'll arrest you for obstruction." But Claire only held her ground, replying firmly, "I know my rights, and you can't stop me from recording misconduct." Her courage emboldening the bystanders, several of whom pulled out their own phones to record as well, until the scene had shifted from Bradley's performance of power to a wall of witnesses standing firmly against his injustice. And Sergeant Miller, the higher-ranking officer who had arrived as backup, finally stepped forward, his brow furrowed as he took the license and registration from Bradley's hand, glancing over them properly, and within seconds his expression hardened. Everything checked out perfectly. The car was registered to Marcus, his license was valid, there were no outstanding warrants, nothing suspicious whatsoever. And Miller turned to Bradley, his tone sharp and authoritative. "This man is telling the truth. His documents are in order, and there was no probable cause for this stop." But Bradley, red-faced and flustered, tried to interject, stammering, He looked suspicious, and people like him," only to be cut off by Miller's stern voice. "That's enough, officer. You're out of line." As the crowd gasped at the slip of prejudice that had betrayed Bradley's real motive, and Marcus, though relieved, still felt the sting of being publicly degraded, though he drew strength from the sight of strangers now standing on his side, some even clapping, when Miller handed his documents back with a sincere, "I apologize, sir, for the way you've been treated. This should never have happened." Words that Bradley glared at as though they were poison. But it was too late, because by the next day, the videos had gone viral, shared across social media platforms, picked up by local news stations, the footage of Bradley sneering, dismissing valid documents, and humiliating Marcus becoming undeniable evidence of bias and misconduct, sparking outrage throughout the city, and within a week, the police department announced that Officer Bradley had been suspended pending investigation, while community leaders and activists rallied in support of Marcus, holding his story up as proof of the need for accountability. And Marcus, who had initially felt powerless and humiliated, now found himself speaking at town halls, his voice strong, as he said, "No one should be treated like a criminal simply for existing in their own skin," his words resonating with hundreds who came to hear him, while Bradley, stripped of his badge and facing disciplinary hearings, was left to reckon with the truth that arrogance and prejudice had destroyed the very career he had once used as a weapon against others. And though Marcus knew nothing could erase the sting of that day, he also knew that justice had found its way, not just for him, but for others who had been silenced. Because in the end, the truth stood taller than the lies, and karma, steady and undeniable, had turned the tables so that the man who had humiliated him in public was the one brought low before the eyes of the world. A reminder that dignity, patience, and truth are far stronger than hate, arrogance, or power abused.